Americans are shocked to learn that $2.7 trillion of their hard-earned tax dollars have been stolen or wasted in improper payments since 2003. And I have to tell you, the American people have not been getting their money's worth for a long time. Most improper payments in recent years were issued through 5 programs: Medicare, Medicaid, the Earned Income Tax Credit, Pandemic Unemployment Insurance, and the Paycheck Protection Program. But a total of 16 federal programs had improper payment rates of 10% or more in 2023. To get their arms around this problem, Elon Musk and the DOGE team went straight to the source. They went to the Treasury Department's Fiscal Service, which makes about 90% of the trillions in federal payments issued annually. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your testimonies and the suggestions that you have brought before this committee. I'd also like to thank Chairman Comer for this opportunity to chair the historic Oversight Subcommittee on DOGE. Americans are shocked to learn that $2.7 trillion of their hard-earned tax dollars have been stolen or wasted in improper payments since 2003. You see, in the private sector, companies can't continue to run if they keep employees that allow waste and abuse with their resources. But that has continued for decades here in the federal government. Mr. Talcove, do private sector companies have a lower rate of improper payments than the federal government?
Yes, the fraud rate that the criminals are taking advantage of in the public sector is around 20%. In the private sector, it's around 3%, and it's really because the tools that are used in the private sector aren't used in the public sector. Front-end identity verification, self-certification, and then finally making sure that individuals are who they say they are. If we start using these tools, you will see the fraud rate go down dramatically, because for the most part, this fraud isn't taking place by real individuals. It's individuals whose identities have been stolen on the dark web. They use that information pretending to be somebody else, and because of the antiquated systems, processes, and technologies in place in government programs, they're able to steal at scale.
Right. So, Mr. Talcove, we would say that private companies that pretty much have to exist on a 20% profit rate, they are not allowed, they can't continue to be successful if they were to allow their customers' data to be stolen like that and used by criminals. However, the federal government, who can continue printing checks and continue in operation, never fixes its problems because it can't be forced to go out of business. Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes. One of the things I noticed during COVID was the criminals learned that government was the mark because it never runs out of money. And they focus on it at scale, and then the likelihood of getting caught is virtually zero.
I think it's outrageous for Americans to know that their identity can be stolen and then used for child trafficking, drug trafficking, and terrorism, like you stated in your opening statement. Ms. Royal, your testimony states that many programs operate under essentially an honor system in which applicants need not verify their identity, income, residency, or other key eligibility factors. You call this a trust everyone instead of a trust by verify approach. Does this mean the federal government in some states are giving out billions of dollars to individuals without verifying who they are or whether they meet program eligibility requirements?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
That's outrageous. Do states have enough incentive to prevent fraud and to recover improper payments?
No, and in fact, states are hesitant to spend their state dollars to protect federal dollars.
Would greater investment in program integrity efforts yield a positive return for taxpayers?
Yes, it could easily be self-funding.
Amazing. Mr. Whitson, your testimony states that both the Biden and Obama administrations issued rules and guidance that made it harder for states to verify eligibility for Medicaid. You say that repealing Biden's Medicaid streamlining rule would save $164 billion over 10 years because the rule restricts eligibility verification that states can perform. Can you explain why this rule is so costly?
Yeah, so the rule does a number of things, but for instance, it prohibits states from verifying eligibility more than once a year. So for non-disabled folks to just go in and look and say, hey, are you still eligible for the program? It says you are forbidden from doing that any more often than once a year. And so obviously people's lives change, and so they may become ineligible, and so it's designed to keep them on the program. Another thing, it prohibits in-person or phone interviews to verify their identity. So people apply for it, and then the person on the other end says, well, I just want to call and make sure this is a real person, not someone in another country or whatever. The rule prohibits that. And so there's a number of other provisions. It also opens a lengthy reconsideration periods, and this is where illegal immigrants are able to obtain the benefits. And so basically it says once you get these benefits, you can't interfere with it for a 90-day period or longer. And so there's a number of horrible things. But.
So we can't verify if someone is illegal or legal receiving benefits. Just to correct that, yes or no?
You have to wait a state has to wait at least 90 days. And actually what we're seeing is it's led some states to wait as long as 13 years. And so on the program.
Unbelievable. The gentlelady yields. I now recognize myself for closing remarks. President Trump was elected with a mandate to rein in unaccountable bureaucracy in Washington and to wage war on waste. I know that because I campaigned alongside him, and so did my colleagues. This hearing was the first battle of that war, and in the coming days, the subcommittee will release a report with legislative solutions to the problems we have identified here today. We aren't going to wait all the way until the end of this Congress. We're going to get to work immediately. The bureaucrats who have run Washington for decades are beyond the point of forgiveness. Their sheer incompetence and pure spite for the hardworking American people have resulted in total failure. The federal government has made over $2.7 trillion in improper payments since 2003, including $236 billion in 2023 alone. Those are trillions of dollars that honest Americans have paid in taxes at gunpoint over the years. As we approach April 15th, Americans are once again preparing to do their taxes and fork over their unfair share of money it takes to run this country. And I have to tell you, the American people have not been getting their money's worth for a long time. Most improper payments in recent years were issued through 5 programs: Medicare, Medicaid, the Earned Income Tax Credit, Pandemic Unemployment Insurance, and the Paycheck Protection Program. But a total of 16 federal programs had improper payment rates of 10% or more in 2023. That includes SNAP, the federal food stamp program, which paid out $10 billion taxpayer dollars improperly. To get their arms around this problem, Elon Musk and the DOGE team went straight to the source. They went to the Treasury Department's fiscal service, which makes about 90% of the trillions in federal payments issued annually. The audit of these payment systems was long overdue. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent gave DOGE employees working for the government read-only access to these systems so they could conduct that initial audit. That audit is already paying dividends. Musk learned that the databases federal agencies are supposed to check to prevent payments to fraudsters, crime rings, and dead people are not being kept up to date. Going forward, we are going to get more mileage out of these do-not-pay databases. That means fewer improper payments and less fraud and waste of taxpayer dollars. Despite this fraud that's already been revealed, a federal judge in New York issued a ruling last Friday that ran totally contrary to the will of the people. The judge blocked not only DOGE, but the Treasury Secretary himself from accessing his own agency's payment systems. That's absurd. Only career Treasury Department unelected bureaucrats can access the system The judge ruled. This turns the Constitution on its head. We will hold this judge and others who try to stop the will of the people and their elected leaders accountable. As is written in the Federalist Papers, the judiciary has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or the wealth of the society. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm for the efficacy of its judgments. But the whole DC swamp is freaking out that the unelected officials from DOGE were allowed access to these systems. That makes no sense. Federal judges were not elected. The Treasury bureaucrats were not elected. And they have failed to fix the problem that is enabling American taxpayers to be robbed. So why not bring in skilled outside experts like private companies and private citizens who are successful in the real world to do everyday work that we need to get done here, like audits? Of course, federal payment systems are only one link in the improper payment chain. We need to look at other links in the chain. We need better front-end identify verification to screen out fraudsters, and we need to close eligibility loopholes. That means not letting applicants self-attest to their own eligibility. And it means ending categorical eligibility, which lets someone who fraudulently qualifies for one federal benefit automatically get other federal benefits. Finally, we need to better coordinate fraud prevention efforts between federal governments and the states. These are all issues that we will be taking a hard look at in this committee and coming up with solutions to, including legislation and referrals to committees of jurisdiction that will deliver for the American people. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there is no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.